Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining me today. So we're going to do a quick session on sizing virtual GPU workloads for Horizon View. And a lot of people may have access to this material. A lot of people might not. Most of this comes from VMware and NVIDIA Grid technical decks. So we'll walk through this real quick and hopefully help you size your GPU environment. So there are a few different ways you can use GPUs in your environment. You have VSGA, which is a shared system that's at the virtualization layer, doesn't go up into the virtual machine or anything. Then you have the NVIDIA Grid VGPU, where you actually have drivers up into the virtual machine. And the last is VDGA, which is a pass-through based system. So those are the three options that you typically see with the grid cards from NVIDIA. And we'll be talking about the center column. So hang on and let's have some excitement. First thing we're going to talk about is sizing ESX for rich graphics compute. Typically what you'll see there are two monitors. And we'll talk about monitors in a bit, but you'll typically want to have two display adapters inside the physical host. And this is to make sure you can select the correct graphics driver to pass through. And then you also typically have CPU constraints that you need to pay attention to. The CPU constraints, typically you'll find that you're going to need a higher clock speed as opposed to more cores, because most graphically intensive applications are not multi-threaded applications. So you want to pay attention to that. You also want to realize that you're going to need multiple CPUs for those virtual machines, or multiple virtual CPUs. That's going to make it easier for the environment to cope and for your virtual machines to run at the performance they need. Now, that obviously leads to RAM and what we have to do with that. So down at the bottom you can see we have your medium workloads, your high workloads, and your heavy workloads. The medium typically tends to be where you find it, which is 16 gigs of RAM per host, or per virtual machine, which is a lot of RAM going to the virtual machine, especially since the memory compression's been removed in most of the View environments. So you want to take that into account as you're building out your ESXi host. That gets us to storage. So storage is often overlooked in the vGPU space. And the reason for that is, I'm just dealing with files. Typically with visually intensive users, you'll find that the files can be around a terabyte in size. So your end users that are out there with their files, you see a 1 terabyte file moving around. That is absolutely normal in the vGPU space. And so you want to be aware of that. The other thing you want to have to back that up is SSD storage of some sort, whether that's through vSAN with an all SSD array, or if it's with an all flash array, and I'm not going to get into vendors or anything on that. You can use your own judgment there. But you want to make sure you have that SSD to really provide the performance for those graphics users. And of course, we can't leave out the NVIDIA Grid cards. There are actually several different NVIDIA Grids, or several different manufacturers of GPUs. NVIDIA Grid is the one that has the most options and most choices when it comes to virtual GPUs, or any GPUs. And as you can see on the screen right now, we have the Grid K1 and K2 listed here. This week at VMworld, it's exciting that NVIDIA announced the M60 and the M6 grid cards, so Grid 2.0. So those effectively double the capacity and performance characteristics of what you see on the screen, which is super exciting. So what we have here is a really nice chart that was put together by VMware that actually walks through some of the sizing around how the users and everything can actually perform and what their frame buffers are. So this will help you size and figure out how many GPUs or how many users you can put on a single GPU card. That said, let's talk a little bit about the VGPU profiles for NVIDIA Grid. So we can pass through a VGPU that is of standard size, or of the full size of the GPU, which basically a NVIDIA Grid K2 has 2 GPUs on it. So we can pass one GPU to a virtual machine and another vGPU to another virtual machine and just do a pretty close to a straight one-to-one mapping. Then we can expand on that and do the K240Q design, or a my bad, I'm reading that right, but yes, my brain slipped. So we can either split that up and have 4 of one configuration or 2 of the other configuration and split that across the 2 GPUs. Oh, there we go. Or we can sit there and span it all the way across all 4. The important thing is we can't mix our configurations across the GPU. So we can't put the K240Q configuration for a small on the same one as a medium configuration. So sizing vGPU recommendations. Here we have some typical layouts on what you're looking at for your user types. So the entry-level engineer, 4 gigs of RAM, which is on the low end, 2 vCPUs, a gigabyte of video RAM, and 2 displays. So not all that much. Then you get into the mid-level engineer. You start seeing the more normal sizing of RAM, which is 8 gigs, 4 displays, and again, 2 gigs of video RAM. So we're increasing that. And then finally, you have the advanced engineer, and that's actually going to be a much more powerful and what you typically see in CAD/CAM operators, where you have 16 gigs of RAM and 4 gigs of video, 4 displays at the high end. And you can take that even higher with the M60, which is the exciting part. So, that said, if you have questions about this or want to dive deeper, feel free to shoot me an email. I'd be glad to take the time with the community to help expand the knowledge around GPU. Thank you.